Morning, Peter. How you doing?
Hey, how are you, Ryan?
Good. I'm looking forward to this. I appreciate you actually agreeing to come on the show. I've been following what Axial's been doing for quite a while, and a couple of my buddies actually just ended up signing up because he's looking to continue his acquisition spree. And what I really loved about what you guys are doing, and we're going to dive into it, is the quote that you got on your page about talking about how inefficient the middle market is, and I think we're going to be diving into that. But so for the listeners who aren't familiar with you or Axial, maybe you kind of explain a little bit of your background, and then how did you start the company? What was the kind of the things you were trying to solve?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Ryan, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I love what you're doing, and delighted to be your guest today. So very quickly, for those who aren't familiar with Axial, we've built a private platform that's confidentially designed to connect buyers and sellers of privately held companies. And our focus is on mid-market businesses in North America, although we serve both buyers and sellers around the world. So that's the quick, sort of elevator pitch on what Axial is and who we work with, and excited to dive in and talk more about the market and some of the things we're trying to do to improve it. Very quickly on me, I'm a son of an entrepreneur, actually, and also a younger brother to an older entrepreneur brother who I joined right out of college. He was starting a company here in New York, and I was coming out of college. So I joined my brother Thomas and his co-founder to develop a business we got started in about 2000. And that business was developing a set of capabilities to connect experts on any topic or any industry with professional investors. And that business goes by the name of GLG. It's also based here in New York. And so I spent the first 6+ years of my life working for my brother and my brother's co-founder, developing what really ultimately turned out to be a marketplace for subject matter expertise that was used by investors to make better decisions and access expertise quickly. And I then left one
expertise. That's super
expertise on any topic. It's a really interesting business. It's used by a lot of the world's strategy consulting firms. The private equity community uses it to find experts as part of a due diligence process. If they want to understand a business more quickly and more efficiently, it's a useful product for them. So really anybody who wants expertise on demand and wants to be able to sort of pay by the hour to speak with experts, both self-proclaimed experts as well as accidental experts, people who spend 10 years operating a power plant and understand exactly how power gets produced and distributed. It's kind of an interesting platform for all kinds of expertise. So I spent 6+ years there working very carefully with both professional investors in private companies as well as in public companies. Then I went back to school, actually, more education, and got a graduate degree at Stanford 2006 to 2008. And it was during my time at Stanford that I worked part-time for a private equity firm that was investing in small and mid-sized businesses. And that was my first sort of front row seat into the way in which businesses are bought and sold in the private market, as opposed to, big publicly traded stocks like Google and Apple. This was my sort of first front row seat into how small and mid-sized businesses are sold, how buyers find them. And I was really struck by the whole process and
or lack of.
whole lack of a process, the status quo, the way in which buyers find sellers, the way in which sellers find buyers, and what was so clearly just a completely haphazard status quo with a lot of information gaps and information asymmetry that in some cases were very disadvantageous to the business owners, and in some cases were disadvantageous to the investors. So lots of problems with the status quo. And so in 2009, to make a long story short, incorporated Axial to serve as a neutral platform that is designed to provide tools and information and a set of connections between buyers and sellers. And it really aspires to just improve the way that the market works, both to improve the outcomes for entrepreneurs, but also to make sure that great investors, great investment partners can more easily be found and can be rewarded for the good work and the hard work that gets done on both sides of the table. It's not just entrepreneurs who need the help. Really both sides need help in order to create a better economy for entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurship.
Well, I love it, and we're going to be diving into that because some of those gaps that you saw and what are still out there. But just to kind of give some weight behind Axial, can you? I don't know if you've got like the numbers memorized, but I got them here if you want. But the amount of transactions, the amount of deal flow and stuff that, like, just to quantify, what it is and the momentum that you guys have been picking up, because I think with an inefficient marketplace like this, data is hard to find and understanding what's going on. So I think you guys have kind of built quite the momentum behind it.
Yeah, so you just want a couple of stats on the platform?
Sure. What has actually happened on the platform over the last decade?
Yeah, so so a couple of things. So, we're disproportionately focused on what we call the lower middle market, which refers to, businesses typically that are generating somewhere between about 5 and 100 million in sales. The lower middle market, from a transaction value perspective, tends to refer to businesses whose value is approximately somewhere between 10 and $250 million. So that's the part of the market that we've really dedicated ourselves to. There are opportunities in other markets as well, probably, but that's the market that we really love. That's the market that we feel we can add the most value to, and the one that we're most sort of well positioned to serve. Mm-hmm. Within that market, there are roughly, if you sort of look at U.S. Census data, roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 to 400,000 businesses just in the United States alone, that make up somewhere between a third and 40% of American GDP and about 100 million jobs.
I was just going to say, like, you and I are going, is that from GF data too that you're getting that? Because I cite those on the podcast a lot. So it's like the 20,000 above the 100 million in sales, 350, and then it's like, 5.6 million companies that are below the 5 million, but like the heart that you're talking about is.
Yeah. So I actually, am between Census Bureau data and then the National Center for the Middle Market, which is an academic undertaking out of Ohio State University. So that's what I'm citing there. And then with respect to Axial, which is a platform that both buyers and sellers and also M&A advisors can join in order to find and connect and be found by the right opportunities. On our platform, we have about 1,700 unique buyers of lower middle market businesses. And then we have, in any given month right now, we have about 500 transactions that are entering the market. In other words, an entrepreneur, either on his or her own or in partnership and in affiliation with an investment banker or an M&A advisor who they have hired and authorized, is sort of entering the market to explore an acquisition, an exit, or some sort of capital raise. Mm-hmm. So right now, on a run rate basis, about somewhere between, call it 5,000 to 7,000 transactions entering the market on an annualized basis. And if you look at the American lower middle market and you sort of roughly sketch it out as 300 to 400,000 business market, our best estimates are that somewhere between 5 and 10% of those 350,000 businesses are transacting on an annual basis, right? So not all of those businesses are transacting every year, but somewhere between probably 5 and 10% of them are transacting every year. So my general sense is that in any given year, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000 transactions.
Is that picking up because of the boomers, Peter? Do you see that? Do you see the actual? And maybe we don't. I don't want to.
It's hard to confirm that the activity in the market is sort of
heating up
is causally related to baby boomers. There have been so many articles over the last 5 years written about baby boomers and this tidal wave of businesses that are going to be for sale, but we don't see some massive discontinuous growth in the growth rate in the number of businesses. It's a very robust market right now to sell businesses. And so there is a lot of selling activity occurring, but I'm not sure that it's, that there's this massive, surge of tidal energy related to the baby boomers, sort of all, heading for the exits all at the same time. I think the truth is that every year, some portion of them decide that they want to proceed. Some portion of them decide to transfer the business into the next generation. I think some of them are exploring ESOPs, which allow them to transfer ownership to their employees. Sometimes they explore a management buyout where the number 2 or the number 3 executive in the business who reports to the owner ends up becoming the new owner. So I think there's a lot of ways that these businesses trade hands, and I think sometimes they trade hands without
anybody even knowing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So, let's stop. I'm curious, on your definition, because I think about the inefficient marketplace and my analogy, and I don't know if you want to take and run with this and how you guys are filling some of these gaps, but I gave the analogy to someone, like the M&A in the lower market, like you were talking about, is like the world of real estate before Zillow and the internet. It's like that, because no one like what a valuation is totally made up most of the time, unless they actually look at the intrinsic, discounted cash flow model. And then, like you said, the process. I was listening. Have you ever heard of the Private Equity Fundcast podcast?
Yes.
Yeah, those guys are talking about the proprietary deal flow process, and it literally just means people just hustling on a trade show or something like that. So I'm maybe give your definition of what do you mean by inefficient, and what would be the ultimate goal, and what's your goal of filling the gaps?
Well, I think, so I'll take the answers in the order that or the questions in the orders that you asked them. I think there's a couple of major inefficiencies in the market that I think are, in one way or another, largely born of some sort of information gap in the market. And when I say information, I sort of say information broadly defined, right? So we believe that one really critical form of information that the market needs is, and if you're selling a business, this is obviously very important, is who is genuinely transactionally active on the buy side, right? Mm-hmm. Who is currently, when it's time for you to sell your business, you only care about firms that are either definitively actively looking to acquire businesses or at least open to doing so. It doesn't matter if a firm is a perfect fit to buy your business if they've just finished acquiring some other business and they're going to take the next 3 years to ingest that acquisition. Mm-hmm. The timing matters so much in this market. So I think one very important piece of information that the market really benefits from is just knowing in real time who is active and who is not active.
Yeah.
That's a really, really important.
Active with the ability to actually have the funds to purchase it too, right?
Yeah. So you're jumping ahead, but that's no, that's fine. That's it. So yeah. So another thing is just capacity to close, right? What is the capacity of the organization to close the transaction, and to what extent can they make that information verifiable and ascertainable by the seller? So if you're Google, it's really easy, right? Everyone knows who Google is. And if you have any doubt about Google, you can go to the SEC's website and you can look up their 10K and you'll see that they've got, $20-30 billion in capital just sitting on their balance sheet, right? So if you want to sell your $25 million business to them, cash is not the constraint, right? The constraint is whether or not your business is relevant and interesting and strategic to them, but cash is not the issue. The problem is that a great many businesses in the lower middle market are not going to be acquired by well-known entities like Google. They're going to be potentially acquired by other owner-operated businesses. They're going to be potentially acquired by private equity firms that have a very limited reputation or limited ascertainable reputation. Mm-hmm. It won't be clear based upon the website whether or not they have a certain amount of capital available. It won't be clear whether that capital is available at arm's length. In other words, they can call that capital from their investors, or they have to persuade their investors on a deal-by-deal basis to do it. So again, the capacity of any entity and organization to close is very important for a seller to be able to vet And those are things that any seller is very well advised to vet on their own if they're selling the business themselves. If they're working with an M&A advisor, that's going to be obviously a very important thing for an M&A advisor to be verifying for them.
Well, I just if I can just because I don't want to interrupt your train of thought too much, but
no problem. Yeah, sure.
But like even like so you got the brokers who like they just slap it on a website, right? And then like they might have some rough process depending on the size of the company and the broker. But then the investment bankers were like they get paid such a large fee to go find these people, right? I mean, they have to go like literally shake the trees to find these active buyers, and that's like one of their hardest jobs, right? I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, no, look, they're in the business of helping, businesses, get bought and sold. They really, as a professional class, they make all of their economics are very largely leveraged to whether or not they successfully close the sale of a business. They should be, keeping their lights on with a retainer to the extent that that's appropriate and necessary. But, investment bankers should be really aligned with a transaction getting closed successfully. And so you're right. They need to spend a significant amount of their time determining who is active, who is relevant, who has the capacity to close. And then I was going to just sort of say, I think one of the sort of last bits of information that's really, really important for sellers to understand, and I think this matters much more when you're buying and selling businesses than when you're buying and selling real estate, is what is the reputation of the buyer? Mm-hmm. Right? What is the reputation of the buyer? And I mean reputation broadly defined. I mean, what is their history of buying businesses in your industry? What is the absence of a history? And does anything tell you one way or another about that? Are they responsive and easy to deal with? Do they have a history of just good behavior after the transactions? Right. If you pick up the phone, if they're a repeat buyer of businesses, if you pick up the phone and you call 3 or 4 or 5 CEOs who sold their business to that, to that buyer, whether it's a corporate buyer or whether it's a private equity buyer, and you were on an anonymous phone call with that CEO, what would they say? Mm-hmm. Right? What would they tell you? So I think the reputation of the buyer, the capacity for the buyer to close, and then understanding what the buyer's current appetite and intent is are 3 really, really critical pieces of information that really dictate how a seller should be spending their time and who they should be spending their time with. And that information, the government doesn't maintain that information, right? It's not some publicly available source of information that we can all use and rely on. So a lot of what we have worked really hard to develop at Axial is to try and lean into some of those information gaps, mm-hmm. And make some of that information more available. The reputation is probably one of the most interesting things. Once you sell your house, you couldn't care less whether they tear it down or whether they, it's a house. There's there's little emotion. There's not a lot of emotion, right? There's not a lot of emotion. Sure, yeah, there are cases like that where your grandfather built the house himself or something like that. But generally speaking, as long as you've achieved a fair number for the home and you've moved out, it's not a living thing. Whereas when you sell your business, whether or not you're going to be staying on to run the business after the sale, or whether you're going to be moving on, the business continues to have a life. There are people that are going to be at that business working in employee and executive capacities. There are customers. There is the name of the business and the reputation of the business in its market and with its customers. So it's a more complex decision for a seller than it is when you're selling a home. And I think that's why reputation in the market is very, very important in the purchase and sale of businesses, whereas I think it's less interesting of a data point for a firm like Zillow to worry about.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, and like understanding what their motive, not only their reputation, but the motives for buying the business too. I mean, because they could have a completely different motive, even though they might have a good reputation. What is the point of buying the company, right? And like understanding how that fits.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And I think, unfortunately, there's a limited, you will never get perfect information in these transactions. And, someone can present themselves as very easy to do business, and they can lay out a motive for acquiring the business that sounds very coherent and attractive to the seller. And then, once the ink is dry on the purchase agreement, they are legally in a position to proceed as they see fit with the business. And that's part of, that's, I guess, part of the painful reality of deciding to sell your business is, you are selling control of the entity to somebody else. So you can never fully protect yourself against, hidden motives and things like that. But I think you can, with the right time horizon, the right preparation, and the right set of tools and information, I think you can really manage those risks much better than you could in the pre-internet age,
Right.
as an example. Yeah.
So one of the, when you think about the challenges that, like, I was actually talking to this friend, he's in the private equity space, and, you talk about, the private equity fund cast, there's all these people that are trying to circumvent systems like yours because they want to buy it on the cheap, right? Or not necessarily that might be the wrong way to articulate it, but, they want a good deal, right? So the more efficient a marketplace is, the more efficient the valuations are and the actual target pricing, right? So how do you see that challenge as you are striving to make a more efficient market, that you're dealing with kind of like the fray of where attracting the right buyers? Does that question make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I think it's a bit of a, I understand that hypothesis, obviously, that, and the perspective that, that a buyer might have. I think it's largely untrue, regardless of whether or not you're using platforms like Axial to develop relationships and to find a pipeline of target opportunities. The truth is that whether or not a seller of a business is using a platform like Axial or has hired, if a seller spends any time online reading just some good basic literature, if a seller hires an M&A advisor who has a reasonable degree of experience and professionalism, the truth is that in all likelihood, the seller is going to approach a meaningful number of potential buyers when they enter the market to explore the sale of the business. And so the idea that, the offline world, it is a world that's filled with a whole bunch of opportunities where you're going to be the only buyer at the table, that's not correct. That's factually wrong. And I think what platforms like Axial do is maybe make that the feeling a little bit more visceral that the buyer feels. So they sort of feel like, okay, if I'm joining these platforms, I'm competing directly with other buyers. It's maybe a little less obvious to them that they're sort of dealing with that competition when they do things in the offline world. But I do think that the truth of the matter is good businesses that are carefully preparing for a sale, carefully selecting an M&A advisor, or thoughtfully preparing to do it themselves, they're always going to be in a position in the modern day to approach multiple buyers and run a process where they're reaching out to those buyers concurrently. They don't have to use a platform like Axial. They can just use email and a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet and the telephone, and they can just do it the good old-fashioned way. And so what that really means for buyers is that, you really can't put your head in the sand on this topic anymore if you're a buyer and just sort of say, well, I'm just going to only talk to, to business owners that are not using an online platform because that's where all of the bargain prices are going to be. What you really should be doing, in my opinion, as a buyer, instead of trying to hunt for a good business that you get an unfair low price on, is you should take all of the time that you're spending trying to do that and spend all of that time figuring out how to be a really effective and differentiated partner, financial partner, for certain kinds of business owners.
Don't just be. I totally agree. Because like if you and I each had $1 for every single stupid letter and email that went out that said, "Hey, by the way, my name is Ryan Tansen and I want to buy a company in your industry for lots of money between, this EBITDA and this EBITDA." It's like, oh my gosh, like, could you be any more vanilla? And it's like, and this, I think it ties into, some of the true problems that these sellers have is like trying to find someone that believes what they believe from their company and the vision. And it's like, it's going to be about the money, but like you said, if they got the right professionals, they're going to get to the price or the deal structure that is ideal anyways. So they're looking for, it's more about it's like the match. It's like match.com, right? I mean, you want to be able to see who are you, what are you about, and why should I trust you with my business? The money should also come. I just
Yeah, no, I think, look, I mean, I think one of the reasons why that's not, why what I suggested is the right use of time for buyers, one of the reasons why the market hasn't fully embraced advice like that is because, unlike so many other businesses, the very often the business of buying companies, when you're a professional buyer of companies, you need very, very few successful acquisitions in order to yourself be a successful buyer, right? Yeah. And so if you happen to just get lucky and find a seller who, accepts your price and wants to move quickly and doesn't run a comprehensive process of engaging with a variety of buyers, and you're able to just quickly sneak in there and say, listen, I'll pay you cash, and here's the terms of the deal, and I'll close in the next 45 days. If you can sort of sneak in there and you can get that transaction across the line as a buyer, that's kind of all you need to do very often for that entire year. The industry of private equity buyers and corporate buyers, it's not an industry where you need to be doing dozens and dozens of transactions each year in order for the economics of your business to work, right? I mean, imagine if think of it this way, right? You said before we got on the show that that you and your father, you guys ultimately developed a business, a $20 million family-owned business. In order to generate $20 million in sales in any given one of those years, how many sales did you have to make? How many?
Oh my God. I had 20 sales reps on staff and sales engineers.
Right. And so how many of those 20 sales reps, how many of them how many sales were they making each year in order to hit their number?
Well, yeah. The younger reps, it was 35 grand to 45. Well, it's probably more now, but 35 grand in revenue per month. And then the more senior accounts, it was like 100 to 250,000 a month.
And how many individual sales units was that?
Oh my God, it was a lot.
Yeah, so I guess that's my point, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a professional buyer of businesses, unless you're doing some incredibly acquisitive roll up where you're buying really small businesses, 5, 10 at a time, you only need to close one sale a year. You need to make one transaction a year, right? And so I think that's part of the reason why there is, there's a continued investment of time and money by the industry to cold call business owners, to email them directly, to try and cozy up to them at trade shows and see if they can get these sort of proprietary conversations going, because again, they only need to close one deal a year in order to get promoted, in order to get paid. And so they don't necessarily need to build a repeatable process by which to identify acquisitions. They really kind of just need one a year. Yep. And so I think that's why you see a lot of the industry still spend a lot of their time sort of trying to find some bargain somewhere.
But don't you think, Peter, that I think one of the best things that could ever happen for the middle market like this is the sellers to get on this, because if there's inventory for these buyers, then they'll go there, right? And I think the biggest challenge, I've been trying to solve this problem for 5 years now, and sometimes I feel like I'm fighting gravity, Peter, and I don't know if you do too, but it is the entrepreneurs, because you and I both are as well. So not only are we both entrepreneurs, but then we're also helping satisfy the entrepreneur. And it's like you're going until all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're out of energy. And then all of a sudden it's like, how do you catch someone where they can get educated to explore the market? Because the more educated they are, and then if they as the sellers, and especially if the boomers and the wave is ever coming, is to get educated themselves. To get on a platform like yours is like the best thing that can happen for the entire economy, in my opinion. I just don't know how you can suck them into that ecosystem, because then you're going to like circumvent the buyers, and the buyers are going to have to go to where the inventory is.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think what we I don't think that we at Axial feel, like we're ever going to sort of solve this problem, maybe perfectly or in its entirety. But I think one of the things that we feel really strongly about is investing in high quality and free education for entrepreneurs, and taking advantage of the internet's reach and distribution in order to do that. So from the earliest days of starting the business at Axial, we have had an online, digital publication, and it started out as a blog, and it's really become more of a publication, an online publication. It's a little bit,
Yeah, it's good content. You guys do a good job.
And, there's a whole bunch of content that profiles transactions and profiles how to prepare for transactions, and helps entrepreneurs understand the concept of being transaction ready, and what does transaction readiness mean, and what are the steps that are associated with doing that, and checklists that you want to just sort of have access to, just the way a pilot gets in the plane. When you're an entrepreneur and you're getting ready to sell your business, you are like a pilot getting in a plane.
And you've never flown before.
Yeah, exactly. And you really want to have good checklists, right? You want to have good checklists that help you understand, okay, do I understand what this process entails? Do I understand how long it takes? Do I understand who I need to be working with and soliciting advice from as part of this process? Just do I have an understanding of sort of what this flight path is? And do I understand how to manage the plane through turbulence? It's just and you can create a lot of, if you're really dedicated to it, you can create a lot of information and tools that is really useful and very accurate, and really does help and prepare entrepreneurs. And, just 2 weeks ago, as an interesting example, an entrepreneur who is getting ready to sell his business probably in the next 2 years. He runs a software business, and it's a perpetual license software business that's been migrating to the SaaS model. Sells a lot of software to both domestic and foreign governments. And his email just landed in my inbox. He said, I've been reading your publication and downloading your checklists and your valuation guides for years now. And I've decided that I want to sort of work backwards from selling the business at some point in 2020. Mm-hmm. And, I'd love to just have, a few minutes of your time to just talk about a couple of open questions that I have. And he had copied his daughter, who's been part of the family business, for as long as he has been running it. It was interestingly, it was a corporate carve out where he did a management buyout from a big corporation. And you can just tell that his timeline and is realistic. You can tell that he's been spending time on the internet looking for accurate and relatively reliable sources of content to educate him. And that, I think, is a really, really big change for entrepreneurs now. As the arrival of the internet and the arrival of access to information on how this whole process works has really eliminated, in my mind, an excuse for why entrepreneurs can be unprepared for these processes.
Well said.
It's certainly a hard thing to get prepared for if you've never done it before, and reading blogs and articles on the internet can only prepare you so much. But with the arrival of the internet, with podcasts like yours, publications like Axial's, and lots and lots of other firms that are putting out good information on this, there's a lot less of an excuse for entrepreneurs to just sort of out as sheep among the wolves. It's just, there's a lot of good information out there now. They really just need to be aware of that, and to take the initiative to prepare themselves so that they're not disappointed after the fact.
I think you nailed it, Peter, because I think about 7 years ago when I was sitting in my office and I did have Google up, right? And I'm like, who should I Google? There wasn't even this whole exit planning thing was not really a thing. I don't know if 7 years ago was a long time in the world of online. And the only blogs you'd see was 400 words from some CPA like, hey, by the way, you should do a quality of earnings. Like, well, that doesn't help. So I think you're right. There is a bunch of material out there that it is difficult, but you have to roll up your sleeves and you have to learn it. I mean, like I said to someone at the end of my speech, I'm like, what's the biggest take? I'm like, this is your deal. Like, you have to take ownership over this. You can't totally delegate all this because you will be unhappy somehow.
Yeah. It's a very complex transaction. It requires preparation. It requires working with people who are both skilled and who you trust. You can't just pick up your head one day and say, I'm tired. I want to sell the business, and think that you're going to be ready, later that day. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's the biggest thing that I hear. Axial provides tools to both the sellers and the buyers, and the tools that we provide to the sell side are overwhelmingly used by investment bankers and M&A advisors. We cut them out of the process. We've partnered with that community and try and put tools and information in their hands to help them drive better outcomes for their clients. And I think as a result of having done that, we've built a lot of really, really good direct relationships in the market of business brokers and investment bankers. And there's no question that market has, good, highly skilled professionals and also people that are just not doing a lousy job. But that's really no different than any other industry.
Same, man. Yeah, same.
It's the same thing in every industry. It's not just the investment banking and business brokerage industry.
2% of the people that are doing really good work.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's true in really the whole labor economy. There's good people and bad people. They're not just bad people in the world of investment banking. but as much as the press would like you to believe that to be the case. And so, what I think they really struggle with when they're selling lower middle market businesses really is all of these, preparation related elements when they're working with their clients, right? The client says,
even just having an educated person.
Exactly. An educated person, somebody who has a decent understanding for the timeline, someone who understands the work that goes into being transaction ready. If you've been managing your business for 15 years and you have no coherent, accurate books and records, or your books and records are, sort of half of it's in Excel and half of it's in QuickBooks, you have a lot of cleanup work that you need to do. Even if you've got a good business, you have a lot of cleanup work that you have to do in order to be able to enter the market and engage with professional buyers of businesses. They need to be able to understand your business. They need to be able to understand how the P&L works and how the dollars go out of the business and go into that. They need to be able to trust that those numbers are more or less exactly accurate. And, when you as an entrepreneur don't appreciate that that's a fair ask and a fair expectation, you really have nobody to blame except for yourself. It's just, it's part of selling a business that a buyer is going to want to know. How does your business work? How does cash move in and out of the business? And are your records and documentation accurate, right? And those are, so I think, what we really work very hard at Axial to do when it comes to educating the market is we don't want to coddle entrepreneurs on these topics. It's really important that they not feel coddled, and just because they're sort of the entrepreneur and they're the underdog. We really try to make it very clear what the fair requests and asks are of them, so that they're not surprised. And I think that's a really, really important piece of it is making sure that entrepreneurs don't just get to point the finger at the private equity guys and say, oh, they're impossible. They need to take some ownership and ensure that, that they really have done the work to make their business understandable to an outside party.
I think that's well put, because, and especially given the point that you made earlier, Peter, about there's enough information out there, right? Versus, 10 years ago where they didn't know what PE firms were, they didn't understand value. Right. So I think you're very, it's very true. And it is difficult, Peter, because when I see, I've been in these CEO peer groups for a long time now, in and out of different versions of Vistage and like local ones here. And everybody talks, Peter. And I like, one of the things that I think about what is one of my missions is like, every entrepreneur is talking about, I mean, how many books about scaling you have? I mean, like scale, revenues, scale. Yeah. But it's like, what's it worth? Like, how about we like integrate this into the business conversation of all these communities of like, I was sitting in this group once and this guy's like, I'm going to double the revenue of my company. I'm like, why? And he just kind of looked at me weird. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, because it sounds cool. And I'm like, well, like, you start to peel it back, Peter, of like, well, he was a distributor of a manufacturer of these railings, right? So then he was going to double down on this. I'm like, well, do you have an exclusive with your manufacturer? And he's like, no. I'm like, and your manufacturer goes direct. I'm like, do you ever think about maybe not doing what you just said? So I don't know. It's just like, I don't know what the point of that is, other than the fact that like, eliminating the excuse of like, entrepreneurs need to start thinking about that, and focusing on the value and focusing on this stuff, because it is what matters, instead of just kind of the old way of managing sales in the business. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think that understanding how you actually build value in your business is different completely. It's a completely different undertaking. And while it's related to the ultimate purchase and sale of your business or other businesses, it is a separate topic for business owners to actually better understand how different kinds of activities and different approaches to building their business will lead to either the creation of value or the absence of the creation of value. You can definitely double your revenue and not increase the value of your business. There are definitely ways to do that, right? And you could grow your business by 10 times in terms of revenue, and you could still not necessarily grow the durable value of the business. There's a lot of ways to do that too.
Or be flat in revenue and increase the value. I mean, to take that
exactly, by contrast, that's exactly right. So I think understanding how value actually gets created and how it gets stored and how it gets preserved is very related to ultimately, the exit planning process and the exit preparation and exit, execution process. But it is a separate discipline. It's definitely a separate discipline and a different area. It's very, very important to have a good handle on that if you're, in the middle innings of your journey as an entrepreneur, right? Or if you're in the early innings. But if you're in the ninth inning and you still haven't really dug in on those issues, then it's going to be challenging to exit your business at a value that that's probably going to be exciting to you.
Yeah, you're more in clean up mode, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the other things that, the value conversation is obviously a very interesting one in terms of really just understanding how does value get created in businesses? How do you create equity value for shareholders in a business? But I think what's also quite interesting when it comes to value is, when you're a privately held business, your business isn't being valued every day by the stock market, right? You don't get, at 9:30 every morning, there's a value for Apple, and there's a value for Apple every millisecond of the day until the exchanges close at 4 p.m., right? And then there's even an aftermarket where, they're continuing to trade. When you run a privately held company, there is no market value for your business day to day. And so when you decide to raise capital for your business or sell your business, those are the moments in time when your private company is going to receive a valuation, right? It's going to receive a valuation. And the way that it's going to receive that valuation is not going to be based upon what some computer spits out is your valuation. The way that a private company ultimately receives its valuation is based upon what a set of buyers says they're willing to pay for the business at that point in time, right? Yep. And so that's why the sort of exit preparation process is so important. And that's why assembling the right set of potential buyers is so important. Is if you only approach one buyer for your business and that buyer says, I think your business is worth $20 million, and you don't approach anybody else, you're not
Just one data point.
you're not creating a set of conditions where you can converge on a market-based price for your business. Whereas if you approach 50 buyers or 100 buyers, and all of those buyers are actively looking to buy businesses like yours, they understand the market for businesses like yours, and they also understand that they are competing to buy your business among a variety of other buyers of businesses, you can begin to form a real market around your business that allows you to actually develop real price discovery around what is the value of your business at some point in time. And so you could build an incredibly valuable business that has great intrinsic value and then blow it completely based upon how you approach the market of buyers. If you built a business that's got wonderful customers that pay you again and again and again, your product is very defensible and differentiated, it's very hard for competitors to deliver the same product as you, and then you go out into the market and you approach one buyer and they say, I think your business is worth $20 million, and it's clear that your business could potentially be worth $30 million or $40 million or $50 million. It doesn't matter that your business might be worth $40 million. What matters is that at that point in time, you've only created a market with one data point. And so that's the value that your business has. And I think that's, that's another piece of valuation and understanding valuation that business owners really need to understand that.
No, I totally agree. And you like so many stories of one buyer and then like people so like absolutely totally agree with your comments. And one interesting, we're actually putting this in our book and kind of the concepts that we've related. You mentioned intrinsic value, and I love that because I think that terminology needs to be pushed out there more of what is the value of your cash flow, just the discounted cash flow valuation of understanding the value and the risk of that cash flow. Because I think if you go back to your point of like, if it is truly worth $30 million, the discounted cash flow should prove that. And it's about how much could your business pay for itself, right? If you were to actually put some debt on it or whatever, like what can your cash flow and the sustainability of your cash flow pay for itself? Then no matter what, like you could go out and in our book, we call it the intrinsic value versus the transaction value. So you're talking about like, okay, the transaction value might be above and beyond the intrinsic because of strategic partnerships or like overlays or, different synergies versus like you always, like if the owner can just always focus on the intrinsic, then you can always get an SBA loan or some sort of, some financial buyer will be able to buy it. It might not be as much as like, but like you said, creating that market will allow you to actually truly understand what the rest of the world values your company at.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's really interesting actually is when you sort of take these three drivers of value for a business, right? One is the intrinsic, just sort of economically rational value of a business based upon the business's capacity to generate cash flow in the future, right? Mm-hmm. And the ability for it to do that in a way that is predictable and protected, right? And that's just sort of the economic rational animals approach to assessing the value of the business, right? Then you have at any given time, you have a market of buyers for a business, that could look at the business and just employ, financial analysis to sort of arrive at probably a relatively similar value to what the intrinsic value is. But what I think ends up being one of the more interesting elements of valuation, both in the public markets and the private markets, is ultimately businesses' value is determined by human beings, and human beings are subject to psychology, right? And human beings are, filled with virtue and vices. They're filled with, benevolence and patience and generosity, but they're also filled with jealousy and envy and greed and avarice. And so these emotions can actually be very, very, very powerful influencers on the prices and the values for different businesses.
So true.
And good, shrewd deal makers, whether it's the entrepreneur himself or herself, or whether it's a good, shrewd investment banker who you've hired, can look for these things and can potentially anticipate these things and some of the time when you see businesses that are being bought for what look like just totally crazy valuations, what's really happening is usually exactly something's happening that is moving the human being away from an intrinsic value calculation of the business, and they either really need to make an investment, because otherwise it's going to have been years and years and years before they actually got a deal done, or they're desperate to affiliate themselves and their career with your company. They want to be someone who invested in Facebook and known to have been an early investor in Facebook, because that will, propel their own personal career in the next 5 to 10 years. There's all of these other sort of elements that can sort of creep into how a human being behaves in a deal-making context. And
I would even say, Peter, that they don't creep in. They're the foundation.
Yeah, well, who knows, right?
It's in every single deal.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it depends on who you've brought to the table, right? Which buyers are at the table. Have you brought someone who is very, sort of cold-blooded, cool-headed, and a composed, rational buyer? Or, do you have a couple of people at the table who have a huge amount of intangible desires that aren't necessarily reflected in discounted cash flow, that is going to ultimately make them pay 10%, 20%, 50% more than the rational buyer. And so I think that's, some of that is luck, some of that is good deal making. But what I can tell you for sure is, if you're fielding inquiries for your business one by one, or you're allowing one buyer to approach you and say, hey, I'd love to buy your business, your chances of being able to set up an environment in which something like that can happen really have plummeted, because they effectively are the only one at the table at that point in time, and that gives them all the leverage and typically gives you as the entrepreneur none. So if you want to try and get the animal spirits of human beings to really come out of the woodwork, your best bet is to be approaching multiple buyers at the same point in time with a good story and a well-prepared set of materials. That's definitely far and away your best bet, and it gives you usually a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. Sometimes you get lucky and someone pays you a crazy number.
Well, with that being said, I think that's and I know we got to wrap up because you got to run here, but that's the point of Axial, right? Is to increase the exposure that people have to this, to make it less manual. So what are the top resources, the top ways that you would point the listeners to if they wanted to go learn more? If there's maybe a top guide or maybe some other tools that we can put links into the podcast.
So a couple things. So, you can go to www.axial.net anytime you want. As a business owner, you can sign up for free and get started. In addition to signing up for free on axial.net, we also have this publication that I mentioned to you, Ryan. It's called middlemarketreview.com. And you can subscribe there for a weekly newsletter with a bunch of tips and tricks and tools. There's a bunch of things that you can download for free, valuation calculators and checklists and stuff like that I have found to be useful for me as I've done different deals and raised money for Axial over the last 10 years myself. So you can check out all those things, and as an entrepreneur, you can get started with all of this stuff for free. We don't really have a set of tools and services for entrepreneurs that are paid for. Everything for entrepreneurs on Axial is part of the free service. And we really, as a business, we really make our money through a revenue model with the investment banking community and with buyers that are looking to buy your business. So if you're an entrepreneur, it's just a nice free resource, and you can get started there anytime you've got a connection to the internet.
Peter, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show.
Ryan, thanks very much.
I don't know if you want to drop your contact information or just sort of point people to Axial. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If anybody wants to reach out to me just privately offline, I'm always talking with entrepreneurs and carving out 15 to 30 minutes to talk to an entrepreneur and lend a hand. My email address is peter@axial.net. That's AXIAL.net. And I'm available anytime for a confidential conversation or any way that we can be helpful to entrepreneurs. That's what we're here for.
Thanks, Peter, for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity.